All right, let's just dive right into this explainer. Today, we're looking past the obvious excuses to diagnose the real reasons why startups fail. Now, if you spend any time at all in the entrepreneurial world, you've definitely heard the grim statistics about startup mortality. It's rough out there. But today, we're going to get to the absolute root of the issue. We're drawing on some incredible insights and firsthand data from founder, strategy consultant, and investor Misty Kane. Basically, we're putting startups under the microscope. So, to understand why startups fail, we first have to look at how we view business itself. Misty Kane points out this really brilliant contrast. Remember being, an 8-year-old kid? One of her absolute favorite games was literally just playing business. Clocking hours on a plastic toy phone, having very important imaginary meetings, and magically making tons of money with zero actual experience. That's a super fun childhood fantasy. But the harsh reality of startup failure rates, which Kane now observes firsthand as an investor literally handing out real money, is incredibly sobering. Building a successful startup is profoundly difficult. And when things go south, well, founders are usually pretty quick to point fingers. But here's the thing. There is a clear distinction between the common excuses founders give and the actual diseases killing the company. Ask a founder why their company folded, and they'll tell you their co-founder left. Or, they couldn't secure that next round of funding, or a sudden recession hit, or a pandemic threw everything off track. And yes, absolutely, those things heavily impact success. But if you were to put any of those reasons into a medical decision flowchart, they're just symptoms. They aren't the root cause. The true underlying diseases are much, much more foundational. So, having established that we are dealing with symptoms versus root causes, here is our diagnostic roadmap for uncovering the truth today. First, the startup diagnosis. Second, Disease 1, loving the solution. Third, the accidental successes. Fourth, Disease 2, lack of speed. And finally, the problem seeker prescription. Okay, Part 1. The startup diagnosis, moving past the symptoms. Misty Kane really hits the nail on the head with this quote. It perfectly captures the medical framework we're using today. Behind every missed funding round or, sudden team collapse, the business was infected by one or both of these fatal diseases. Either focusing entirely on a solution instead of an actual problem, or simply lacking the speed to survive.
Which brings us to Part 2, Disease 1, loving the solution.
Innovation is basically, at its core, the creative ability to solve problems, right? But so many founders get this completely backwards. You might be thinking, well, isn't coming up with a solution the exact same thing as solving a problem? Not at all. Actually, look at this definition from Professor Diane Halpern from the Minerva Schools at KGI. She says problem solving is the cognitive use of skills or strategies that increase the probability of a desirable outcome. In layman's terms, it means true problem solving is learning as much as you can, testing your hypotheses, and making informed decisions to actually reach that desirable outcome. Starting with a rigid, predetermined solution actually limits your ability to do this. Think of it like this. Building a solution first is literally like continuing to buy boxes and boxes of tissues just because you have a runny nose. That is a solution focus. But a problem focus, that's digging deep enough to realize you're actually allergic to the sesame seeds on your morning bagel. One just temporarily patches a symptom, the other uncovers and cures the root disease.
Moving on to Part 3, the accidental successes.
Let's actually look at how this plays out in the real world. Take the fascinating case study of founder Stuart Butterfield. This is a story of someone who was chronically infected by Disease 1, but managed to accidentally stumble right into the cure. So Butterfield was absolutely obsessed with the solution of building a video game. In 2002, he built a game called Game Never Ending. But ironically, it failed to get traction and came to an end in 2004. However, his massive successes only came when his failed games inadvertently revealed massive underlying problems. During Game Never Ending, Butterfield noticed this incredible user engagement with the game's photo upload feature. Because remember, in the early 2000s, people desperately lacked a way to easily store and share photos online. That was a very real, very pervasive problem.
So here is the crucial point. When his team finally abandoned the game and focused entirely on the specific problem of photo sharing, they built Flickr. The result? Yahoo purchased Flickr for over $20 million in less than a year. Solving a real problem pays off incredibly fast.
But get this, Butterfield was still deeply in love with his original solution. He just really wanted to build a game. So, years later, he tries again with a game called Glitch, and, true to its name, it failed too. But while building it, his engineering-heavy team encountered another massive problem: efficient internal communication. To solve their own problem, they built a little internal tool. When Glitch failed, they had a total light bulb moment. They shared this internal communication tool with friends and colleagues. Fast forward to 2013, they launch it to the public, asking users to imagine all their team's communication instantly searchable in one place.
That quirky internal tool became Slack. And by focusing on that massive universal communication problem, rather than forcing a video game solution onto the market, it was acquired in 2020 at a staggering valuation of over $27 billion. $27 billion? That right there is the power of a problem focus over a solution focus. All right, part 4. Disease 2, lack of speed.
So you can find the right problem, but if your execution is sluggish, you're still going to fail. To understand speed in this context, we really need to understand what it means to ship in the startup world. Shipping just means making a product or a feature available to actual users. To perfectly illustrate this, Misty Kane shares the story of a founder she mentored named Brian. She actually ended up calling him Captain Brian because he tested the waters and shipped like it was his full-time job.
Brian was building an open-source insights startup. And what made Brian so special was his frantic, real-time urgency. Kane recalls being in mentoring meetings with him, asking him to, maybe consider testing his current messaging. Now, instead of nodding and planning to do it next quarter, like most people, Brian would literally start typing right there on the call. He was building new landing pages live during the meeting. He'd rewrite the messaging instantly, drop a link in the chat to show her, and declare he was ready to test it on current users over the next couple of days. That is speed.
He utilized this exact rapid-fire iterative loop. He would ship code quickly just to ask for feedback. Then, he'd run experiments to test that feedback. Crucially, he would make decisions and ruthlessly kill ideas that weren't getting traction instantly. Basically, anything that helped him figure out how to make progress, he did it incredibly fast. This iterative loop confirmed that he was actually solving urgent and pervasive problems.
And honestly, the results speak for themselves. Because he moved so fast, Brian didn't just build a startup. He generated immense, undeniable traction. He closed his fundraising round before his 13-week accelerator even ended. He acquired thousands of users, secured multiple design partners, and successfully sold his company in 2024, less than 2 years post-launch. Successful founders like Brian don't just build startups, they rapidly iterate their way away from failure.
Finally, part 5, the problem seeker prescription.
So now that we've diagnosed the 2 deadly diseases, falling in love with solutions and moving too slowly, it's time for the prescription. Look, building a startup is incredibly hard, and there will always be external setbacks, but failure can be diverted. To dramatically reduce your mortality rate, you've got to diligently combine these 2 actions. First, as you're building, you have to rigorously and continually ask yourself, what's the actual problem here? You must be diagnosing the root issue, not just putting tissues on a runny nose. Second, once you find a problem that is truly worth solving, you have to execute with relentless speed. You must move incredibly fast in everything you do to either mitigate or entirely eliminate that problem for your users.
As we wrap up this explainer, I want you to look at the project you're working on right now, whether you're an entrepreneur starting a brand new company or maybe an intrapreneur innovating within one. Ask yourself this pivotal question. Are you just building a solution because you fell in love with an idea, or are you actively seeking a pervasive problem? Discard the symptoms, diagnose the real diseases, and dare to become a fast-moving problem seeker. Thanks for exploring this with us today.